Welcome back to the Eternal Self, a sacred space for timeless conversations where we explore the deep soul codes of dharma, purpose, and remembrance across lifetimes. I'm your host, Sonia Sharma, and I'm so grateful you're here with me for episode 2 of this journey. In today's episode, we dive into one of the most soul stirring books I've ever come across, Rukmini and the Turning of Time by Dena Merriam. Before we bring Dena in, I want to offer a brief reflection and synopsis of the book to set the stage for the incredible wisdom you're about to receive. So, in summary, this book follows the soul journey of a woman who remembers 7 past lives during the shift between the Treta and the Dwapar Yugas, a time of deep spiritual decline and karmic reckoning. Through her lifetimes as a dancer, devotee, and seeker, we witness the evolution of her soul, the ache of unfulfilled love, the weight of unresolved karma, and the quiet guidance of Mata Rukmini Devi, the queen consort of none other than Lord Krishna and the embodiment of divine love itself. So, this is not a story of outer battles, it is the story of inner completion. Rukmini does not roar, she radiates. She does not chase, she resolves. She doesn't seek closure, she offers it. And in doing so, she becomes a quiet midwife to the karmic evolution of many souls. For those of you navigating complicated love, spiritual longing, or the question of why does this still hurt, this episode is for you. We'll explore relationships across lifetimes, soul contracts, feminine leadership, and what it really means to embody wealth from the inside or out and not just chase it. So now it is my great joy and honor to welcome back to the show Dena Merriam. Hi, Dena, and welcome back for the second podcast. It's such a joy and honor once again to have you back. Thank you.
And thank you for having me. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste. Dena, today I have a very special topic from the book Rukmini and the Turning of Time. And I'm beyond excited actually to have this conversation because so many of my own personal questions got answered as I went through the book. So I just have a few, I wanted your insight on some of the things that really jumped out for me in the book. And I'm sure a lot of help would be there for the viewers and listeners as well. So, first of all, Dena, I just want to say that this just doesn't, the whole book didn't read it. It didn't come across as just a story of one person. It opened up this whole concept of soul memory. And in this memory, while as a reader, when I was going through it, it also started to reflect and give me a lot of meaning for so many incidences and events that have happened in my life. So that was my biggest takeaway, is that our love, our longing, our wounds, and the wisdom that we are still seeking in life, they're all kind of coming from some previous stories.
I think what we don't, what I tried to do in my books is to help make the avatars personal. Whereas it's not just the universal teachings, but the teachings that are given, because this applies to us today, through everyday life. Life is the teacher. Life teaches us. And I try to show how karma works itself out over many, many centuries, sometimes millennia, because everything that we do has some kind of effect, cause and effect. But we may not be ready to really understand the teaching until many lifetimes later. So it's not simply my last lifetime I did that, and this is why my conditions are such. It's karma that's been accumulated over a long period of time. And what the avatars do, what the masters do, is they help free us. They come not just, we think of Krishna, we think of him with the war, the Mahabharata war, or the teachings that he gave to Arjuna. But he lived many, many years, had interactions with many, many people, as did Rukmini. And what they did was help people awaken, help people work through their karmic lessons. Each of us has very specific karmic lessons that we took birth in order to learn. And the guru, the master, the avatar helps us in that process. And even if they're not incarnated, just by tuning into them, if we turn to them during a difficult, when we go through life and we're constantly encountering situations that call forth a reaction, a response. So to become more aware and more conscious of those responses is what we're challenged to do. And the avatar helps us do that.
Wow, beautiful. So, Dina, how does one get to know if there is a recurring pattern in relationships? If How does one get to know that this is my soul's lesson? Is there any way of finding that out?
There are, yes, absolutely. And it's a combination. I always say sadhana is composed of three parts, three things. We tend to think of it as just meditation, but meditation is one part. Reflection of one's life, looking at one's life objectively is a second. And then the third is how we act. We reflect, and then how do we act? So often, if we're unconscious, we have follow the same patterns of behavior. And a pattern of behavior could be simply that, oh, I don't feel like meditating. I'd rather go out and garden. I'd rather go do this. I'd rather go meet my friends. That's a habit that we have to work against. So there are another habit is if somebody says something to you that ticks you off and you immediately respond with anger. Uh, uh, that's also a habitual reaction that we want to overcome. So if you reflect on your life, in a relationship, there are usually, if there's many relationships are there to teach us. Some are, pure. There's like free of any challenge. I know I one couple that had the most harmonious relationship, and I said to them, "You're the happiest couple I know." And they said it wasn't always this way. It took us many lifetimes to get to this point. They had conflictual relationships in the past. But if we have a pattern of behavior with our partner or in a work situation, that's life teaching us this is what we need to attend to.
Hmm. And so this threefold path, when we're doing that introspection about ourselves, is that enough to break a pattern? Because sometimes the pattern repeats, but it's default mode also.
It's
So,
not enough. It's enough to make us aware of the pattern. There are patterns that we're not even aware of.
hmm,
But reflection, and so often the first impulse is to blame the other. I don't get along with so and so because they're a difficult personality, right? I mean, that's a natural reaction. They're a difficult person. So we often we see the other objectively, but we don't see ourselves. Whenever there's a conflictual relationship, there's always two energies that are going into causing that. So the first step is becoming aware of what your response is. Oh, that person, they always trigger me. They always, get me going. And so you become aware of that. And then the second part is being conscious not to have that reaction the next time it happens. So, for example, just any example, your partner is sloppy, he leaves things all over the place, and you get angry because it's extra work for you. So, you come home and the kitchen's a mess, and you get angry and say, how can you do this to me? I've worked all day, blah, blah, blah. So you become aware that this is a trigger for you, that he's because anger can come about for any cause. I mean, it's just a trigger, right? There's so many triggers in our life that make us angry, but you want to overcome anger. We have to overcome anger. So you come home from work and the house is a mess, and you say, okay, first response is anger, but I'm not going to give in to that. And then you say to him, can you help me clean up? It's finding another way to respond to a situation that's triggering a negative emotion, whether it be fear. I mean, there's a lot of conversation now. I see at podcasts about how not to give into fear because there's a lot of things that are triggering fear in people now. And so, how do you not give into fear? Well, sometimes it's by countering the opposite emotion, by leaning more into trust,
Mm.
trusting that everything will be work itself out, that everything is as it should. Because when we give into the negative emotions, whether it's anger or fear or jealousy, we're adding to that collective shadow. We each either add to the collective shadow or to the collective light. And yet, when we counter that and combat fear with trust, we're adding to the light. And so, what we do moment to moment affects the whole atmosphere of the planet. We all contribute to whether this is a planet gripped in fear and anger, or whether it's going to be a more trusting, caring, energetic, vibrational field.
And Dina, what about guilt and shame? Do they also come in the same bucket as fear and anger?
Guilt is a big one. Guilt is a big one, and that's a hard one. I mean, these are all hard to get over. It's not like it's as simple as, oh, I have that reaction. Well, I'm not going to do that anymore. It takes years often of work because you might not respond to the obvious ones, but then it gets subtler and subtler. Ultimately, we have to free ourselves from all harmful negative emotions. I mean, you look at the great masters, they are not they're not burdened by these negative emotions. And so guilt is another big one. Guilt is another big one. And so what's the opposite of guilt? Look at what the opposite of guilt is really knowing yourself
Self-acceptance?
that your essence is good, your essence is pure, and that whatever mistakes you've made are forgiven. Maybe it's forgiveness.
Mm. Mm. Self-forgiveness as well.
I mean, we have to forgive ourselves. I mean, you see in Rukmini in The Turning of Time, Sujata had a very difficult relationship with the woman who became her sister-in-law. And it went back millennium when she had issues with her mother, right? That she couldn't forgive her mother. Her mother was a good person, but she was part of a community that ended up sending her away, and she blamed her mother. So it was blame is another one, judgment and blame. There's a whole list of these emotions that rattle our emotional field. So she blamed her mother and she couldn't forgive her. Well, she's now forced. This woman is a beautiful woman, a good woman, married to her beloved brother, and she's forced to get over it. She's forced to not only, she ends up not only forgiving her, but really coming into a beautiful, loving relationship where they become such supports for each other. And that was, I mean, sometimes in a lifetime, what you achieve is the healing of a single relationship. And that's enough. That's what you've done. You've healed a relationship that has been a thorn in you for a long time, a wound that may have lay hidden, but you've reached the point where you can forgive it. And so, if there is a conflictual relationship, whether it's at work or in the family, you can know that's your karmic lesson for this. That's one of them. Sometimes we just have that. Sometimes we have, a series of things, but that's your karmic lesson. And if it's not resolved in this lifetime, it will have to be in the future.
Hmm.
It's either now or later.
So even if somebody is going through an experience of having different partners in phases, but the result is the same, that's a pattern that's come up. If so, that's also a lesson, I suppose. That is.
You see, I mean, when you look, we all have patterns in our life, I mean, there could be minor patterns and there are big patterns, relationship patterns. And often those relationship patterns are repeated, but because they manifest in different ways, you might not recognize that it's a repeat. It manifests itself differently, and so you treat it as something completely unrelated. But that's why introspection is so important. Um, to really look at to really look at yourself without judging yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, to look at yourself without judging yourself is really that's part of the challenge because the worst thing is when we can say, okay, we shouldn't judge others, but so many of us judge ourselves.
Yes. 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 And what about like, this guilt and shame that I was talking about? The shame or guilt comes from certain expectations of society, so to say, especially in India. Women have so much of archetypal, like, an archetype of sacrifice, of forgiveness, giving, always being at service to others, and all of those things which have been etched into, being a woman, at least, I think across the world, there's a certain kind of a,
That's a very big issue. That's a very big issue. And you see it in the conventional telling of the story of Sita. I mean, you see it even in the conventional telling of Rukmini. So Sita has been made to be a guilty one, so to speak, right? She's got to be punished, right? Even though she's made huge sacrifices for the collective well-being, she's got to be punished. Rukmini is disappeared. You don't even she's Krishna's wife. Who would be his wife but somebody of his stature? And she's disappeared. These some of these shows that they used to put on TV. The her claim to fame, what she's known for, is that she would always be the first one to go worship Krishna. That's how she's regarded. Complete, the devotee, because in the collective mind, that was a woman's role. And it's a huge contradiction because in India, there's also the Devi, there's Durga, there's Kali. So because further back, that was not the woman's role. It's a relatively newcomer during Kali Yuga when everything got twisted. Now we have to realize that everything got twisted during the Kali Yuga because there was simply a lack of spiritual understanding. And so Sita's role got twisted, Rukmini's role got twisted, many of the women rishis got erased. If you look in the Ramayana, in the text, the sages, the women sages, are referred to as the chaste and devoted wife of sage so and so. They're not given their due by any measure. And so this is all the twisting of Kali Yuga mentality that we now have to outgrow because we've moved into a different era. So and that affects the shame.
yes.
That affects this understanding of shame. I mean, just the what has been done to Sita is an indication of that shame. And Rukmini too. Here you have a great woman master avatar. She's known to be an avatar of Narayani and treated as just, a subservient, almost like a housemaid, she's just there to serve Krishna. And that debases Krishna as well. He said the traditional telling of Sita, it's done the most harm to Ram. So
Yes.
in freeing Sita, we free Ram. In freeing Rukmini, we free Krishna.
True, true, true. But I mean, yes, when I said last time that just reading the untold story of Sita just brought about a transformation in me just by reading the book. Obviously, it's about, the hints of the power of the Narayani that reflected in the book. And I'm yet to finish the second one, but I'm getting that same sense of the beauty and the love for art and culture and the playfulness of Rukmini that you have so beautifully depicted in the book. And that's unfolding, another aspect. So, would you like to just give us a brief, like some flavor of before all of this Kali Yuga archetypical formation of this woman figure? What was the empowered women, the Devi like essence of a woman in our, in the Treta Yuga?
So in my new book, Sita's yoga, the yoga of awakening, it's told through the voice of a village woman who, a highly evolved soul, who took birth as many souls did at that time. Many highly evolved souls took birth. It's Treta Yuga, when Ram and Sita were on Earth to to help them, but also for moksha. Because when a great soul takes birth, there are special dispensations given. And so, if you have a little bit of karma left or you have unresolved things, you want to take birth at that time because of that special dispensation. So I tried to give a glimpse of what life was like. It's a declining era, right? There's a loss of knowledge from Satya Yuga, but there's still quite a bit of spiritual awareness. And there were women sages. Women had complete freedom, complete freedom. They had hermitages. It was a pre-patriarchal period. Uh, Patriarchy really didn't enter until the end of Dwapara Yuga, and then really became fixed in the Kali Yuga. And it was a control issue. So one of the things that Ravana did, and Ravana is not just a personality, he's a force. And a force that keeps reappearing in the world. And which is why they say it's an ongoing battle between good and evil. Every generation has to fight its version of it. But what is that force of Ravana? It's greed, excessive greed. It's arrogance, hubris. I mean, he had great knowledge, no question. He had great cities, no question. But he had arrogance and domination, which was unknown in previous times. In this new book, Sita, when she arrives in Lanka, she's amazed at the level of greed because her father, and even in Ayodhya, material possession was not the goal of life.
Mm.
Simply was not the goal of life. Yes, they had beautiful objects, but it was more because of love of beauty than pure greed and domination. So how does the role of women change? As this impulse of domination, you dominate nature, dominate all the animal kingdoms, you dominate classes of people form, you dominate others, you dominate women, you dominate whoever you can, because that's what your ego needs to feel good about itself. Dominating others makes you feel strong. And so that was a quality that became predominant in the Kali Yuga. In the Treta Yuga, there were no wars. There were minor things. Okay, yes, there was the war with Ravan, but there were no standing armies and militarization, walled cities. I mean, there were individual skilled people, individual warriors, but there were no standing armies. By the time you get to Krishna's time, at the end of Dwapara Yuga, there are huge armies. So you see, I mean, Ram had to go to the Vanara tribe to
Yes.
get his assistance. He couldn't say to Ayodhya, "Send me your army." So if you look carefully, and the reason why I think this is so important is because we're now in an upward swing. We're moving through Dwapara Yuga. So in order to see the ascent, you have to understand the decline.
Mm.
So moving beyond greed and arrogance, and I mean, you see arrogance on the world stage, you see domination, one group trying to dominate another. Those things are still with us, but now there's recognition that they're destructive and that we have to move beyond that. There's that recognition now, but we haven't yet really taken action to move beyond. I mean, have we condemned in our society excessive greed? Or excessive arrogance, countries that think that they're, can just do whatever. We haven't, as a world community, understood we have to outgrow that.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, there's a whole new working model to that obviously, uh, I guess some people are thinking about. But just in terms of Dina, in terms of the man-woman relationship, if that's been the working model in one way or the other, isn't an empowered woman too intimidating for a man of this age? And you know And if women are that empowered, because you can literally very easily start to draw down energies and shaktis and everything. Not very easily, well, I stand corrected, but like my question is that if a woman starts to acknowledge and feel her own power and start getting comfort, isn't she like invincible basically? And how would she partner up? What would be like, what do you think?
I think that's one of the social challenges today because it also involves a new understanding among men. I mean, many men, because of an old paradigm, have been intimidated and have lacked the confidence. But truly, if a man wants a partner, rather than someone to dominate over. If he wants a real partner, then there's a balance of qualities and strengths. I mean, the ideal in my mind is a man to have somebody he can lean on. Just like a woman wants somebody that she can lean on, meaning in difficult times, somebody who's there to support her and encourage her and give her the confidence she needs. The man needs the same thing. I mean, I think it's a human need that we come together in social formations, friendships, partnerships, marriages, because we need the support of other people. And we need to feel loved, we need to be cared for. And I think the needs of men and women are the same. But I think men have struggled because for so many centuries, there's been a certain model of what a relationship is. And that is changed in a relatively brief time period. We're talking about a few decades. And men have struggled with, well, what's they've lost their footing in a way.
Yes.
And and some men really struggle with this. Others quickly adapt. I know when we first started the Global Peace Initiative of Women, which was to empower women, I was surprised how many men came to our meetings and said, "We don't want this just to be for women. We
Mm.
really want to come support the women." And when we did normal meetings without, I would see about 20% participation of women. In our meetings, it was about 20% participation of men. Gradually, it grew to about 50-50, because I think that there are many men who are evolving and who see that the ideal, this is what I tried to show, and maybe more so in this new book, of what kind of partnership Ram and Sita had, which was the ideal. And it's the same thing with Rukmini and Krishna. Rukmini, as you know, Ram had one wife. Krishna had many wives, multiple wives, which was the for political reasons. I mean, Arjuna. They all had many wives. Arjuna had four wives, I think, four or five wives, and a lot of it was for political alliances. But in the book, at the beginning of the book, it describes who those other wives were, and how they were beloved by Rukmini, and how they adored her, but she had a conversation with Krishna because he needed her permission. He
Mm.
wouldn't do this without her permission. And he gave her total freedom to do whatever she needed to do and to be whomever she needed to be. And so she had her own life,
Yeah.
which was very dedicated to the upliftment of women, because it was a time when women were coming into difficult times
Yeah.
where it wasn't, many women were in bad marriages, were abused, all of that. In Sita's time, her energy was protecting the natural world because women were free.
Yeah.
There was no, there was no need to have a special
Mm.
dispensation to look after women. By the time you get to Rukmini, the situation for women had changed. And so she devoted a lot of her efforts to trying to uplift women. And Krishna, I mean, she had a completely independent life from Krishna.
It's very beautifully coming across in the book, and it's beautiful.
And
Mm.
yet the times when they're together are
Yes.
very beautiful to me, because that is the ultimate reality. Shiva and Shakti, that is the ultimate reality. That same thing applies to Ram and Sita, and because they manifest at a high level. We tend to want to bring them down to our level
Yes.
and humanize, they, have all these human emotions, but they've transcended them because only in that way can they help us transcend. If they hadn't transcended them, how could they help us?
Yes.
So these relationships are really models of the way it is in a higher realm.
Yes. Yes. It is a very, very different spin to how, for all our lives, we had looked at these relationships and how they
So
were.
the question is, how does one behave if you're in a marriage where your husband doesn't get this?
Hmm.
How does one, that's your challenge.
Hmm.
And there that's a whole nother discussion, but there a lot of the work is internal
Yeah.
so that you become impervious to whatever um, expectations are placed on you.
Yes.
In other words, you don't allow yourself to feel shame or degraded or be impeded. I mean, there are many ways that you can express your being and try to help your partner um, outgrow his narrow views.
Hmm. Tina, I
But
mean,
it's work. It's work.
it's a lot of work. I'm just thinking, Tina, I mean, there are two kind of ideas in my head, which I have not pretty much been able to place them correctly. I mean, I struggle in that area. One is that, you feel that two full people, complete people, financially independent and whole people should come together in a union of marriage, partnership, relationship. Nobody should have to depend on another. There should be some kind of interdependence but not codependence, or whatever the way we look at it, like, not leaning on. So they're two full people, evolved people would, so that would make it good. But what about, like, nature's designed it in such a way that the woman will go through motherhood, pregnancy, raising the child, and all of those archetypes of, she might have to be financially dependent on the partner in a unit, like, or some, not only just, like, the roles are different. So what is an ideal situation when it comes to these kind of life circumstances?
I think that a woman, earlier generations, women they didn't work, and so they really were stuck if their marriage didn't work out. Because
Yes.
I know many people of my generation whose marriages fell apart when they were in their, say, mid to late 40s after the kids left the home, and they had to start at the beginning in terms of forming a career. And they were really much impoverished, actually, because to start at 48 to start a career, you have to go, you're training, you're in your mid 50s before you're really earning any money. It was very difficult. And of course, there are many women who you know, poor women who have to work from the beginning and have to find some care. Child care is a huge issue. It's a huge issue, which our society hasn't yet, except in some European societies, in Northern Europe in particular, society has not caught up with the changing formations and the changing needs. I mean, every society should be providing good child care. So maybe a woman has to stay home for the first 3 years. She has to take a break. And I know that some companies in the West give a 1 year maternity leave. So you get your salary for 1 year, and then you have to figure it out. We now even give paternity leave if the father is the main caregiver. So I think women have to struggle with that, but it should be a joint struggle.
Yes.
Between the couple, it's not just the woman's responsibility. And if the woman has to take some time off because she's nursing the child or whatever, then that has to be factored in to the bigger equation. But I think women no longer have the option of thinking they're just going to be financially dependent for their whole life because there are too many there I mean, life moves more quickly now than it did in the past, and there are too many situations where people don't stay together for their whole life,
Mm.
and if you don't prepare yourself, you find yourself midlife
Mm.
with very little means to take care of yourself.
Mm.
So I think it's a new reality, and society has not yet adjusted to that by providing support for families.
Yes. So it's a complex one, but it's
It's a complex one, and each situation is slightly different depending on the kind of partnership you have with your marriage partner, what kind of agreements you have. But I think there's a recognition that we sort of they're two co-equal people who need to contribute to the financial well-being of the family.
Yes. And also child rearing as well. That
And
expect
child rearing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. That was very insightful because I think a lot of people are struggling with that identity shift and how the dynamics of relationships are no longer the same as we saw our parents go through that, their
Totally
dynamics.
different. Yeah. When I look at the way I grew up with my mother who stayed home and was the main presence in the household, and I have two sons who now have families. And both of my sons are I would say at least co-equal caregivers, if not taking more responsibility. I mean, they're the ones who get home from work first. They're the ones who do a lot of the carpooling. I mean, so I see a generational shift between even in my generation. When I was married, it wasn't like that. And when I see the younger people, it's a much different understanding. And of course, it's not everybody, not every couple. There's still many men who feel threatened by that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, being or feel threatened by being the caregiver. And
Yeah.
I think that's really unfortunate because there's so much, and I see how my son's relationships with their children has developed because they've been so involved in the caregiving. It's a different kind of relationship. And so why should the men be cheated of that?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I think that is even happening in India now. Men are more open towards being rearing the child in public. Earlier, and when we were growing up, it was unthinkable for our fathers to do that. At least they would do it maybe in the four walls of their own house, but not outside. They would be judged if they were being too, you know, caring and overt display of affection and everything. But those things are changing even in India now.
And I think a new concept of what a masculine identity is, what a feminine identity is. I think socially we're grappling with that.
Hmm.
And I think it's all part of the evolution. You know, I think it's, yeah, there's things are changing so rapidly in our society, and it's going to speed up even more with the advent of AI. So we don't know where all that's going to lead. And so we have to learn to really adapt. And, we look at the social trends, but then we have to narrow in on our own life and make it work for us.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, Tina, one uh, question that I have is that if Mata Rukmini were whispering in today's woman's ears a message, women who are carrying emotional burdens, trying to keep the families together, juggling between work, children, family, relationships, navigating a lot of things, there is so much going on in everyone's life. What would she want them to learn, understand, or implement?
I think one of the main messages would be give time to your spiritual life. Somehow find time for your spiritual life because that gives you the strength to manage everything else. There are so many demands and stresses in life today that you can get lost in those stresses and feel overwhelmed. And so, giving time to your spiritual life, even if it's 20 minutes a day, which everyone can find 20 minutes a day, to have some kind of meditation and reflection process where you meditate and then you look at what are the challenges you need to work on uh, so that you can not get totally drawn in. I mean, this is a play. We play this role before you know it, it's over. We move on to another life. We can't get totally sucked in to the particulars of this life. And the only way to do that is to keep some level of objectivity so that we have the wisdom to make the right decisions and what gives us the wisdom. So making time for one's spiritual practice and then tuning oneself to whichever form of the divinity is closest to you, whichever form of the divinity, however the divine appears to you, to stay tuned in to that form throughout the day. The first chapter in my new book is called The Yoga of Inner Attunement.
Okay.
And this villager early on learns to keep Narayani, keep the Devi, as she calls her. And she says when she's in tune with her, things sort of flow in her life. And when she's not in tune with her, there are bumps along the road.
Mm.
So time for your spiritual life and time to cultivate inner attunement.
Okay. Just one final question before we leave, Dina. This is a little bit of my personal curiosity as well. Is that now we know that Mata or Devi Rukmini was an incarnation of Mata Lakshmi, Narayani herself. Then who is Yogmaya Devi? I know one form of Yogmaya Devi is also the sister who was born at the time of Lord Krishna's birth. But do you have any insight into this Yogmaya Devi form of the Devi?
I haven't tuned into that, but maybe that's something I will think about, and we can leave that for a future conversation.
I love that. And that's a brilliant hook to leave for the next one, or maybe whenever we get to that. But thank you so much, Dina. This was so insightful. And I think, again, I'll have to watch it a few times over because we've covered a lot of ground. Is there any final message for the listeners for this podcast?
I think all of us, we just keep doing what we're doing. We try to be more aware, not to be so reactive to what's happening in the outer world, and to be more centered inwardly. And we'll continue to have these discussions. So I look forward to our next meeting.
Yes, brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Dina, and I'll see you next.
Take good care. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye for now.